council meeting to order at 6 p.m. Before we begin, I'd just like to ask everybody that can to stand. And I'd ask for a moment of silence in honor of former Mayor Earl Porter, who left us approximately 2 weeks ago, and there was a celebration of life for him this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. Need a motion for the adoption of the minutes, please.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held at City Hall on September 23rd, 2019 be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Meyer. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have a number of hearings this evening, and I know we have a large number of people in our gallery, so I just want to go through the process for public hearings so everybody understands before we begin. First of all, for every hearing, I'm going to open the hearing, and I'm going to ask if there's anyone here present to speak in favor of the application, and we'll have those applicants speak, and then anyone else that's in favor of the application. And then we'll ask our recording secretary to read out letters of support. And then I will ask if there's anyone present to speak against the application in the hearing. Those people that are against will get to speak. And if there's any letters in opposition, they will be read out. And finally, the applicant can respond to any concerns brought forward. During this process, any member of council can ask questions through the chair and members of council only. Okay. So we'll begin. We'll open the public hearing for variation order PC 69-19. This is for CHB Developments Inc. at 201 3rd Street Southeast. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing?
Your Worship, if I may, I have to declare an interest in this particular item and ask to be recused.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so once again, is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? And this is for variation order PC 6919. This is for CHB Developments Inc. at 201 3rd Street Southeast. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Be it resolved, and I so move that the public hearing for variation order PC 69-19, CHB Developments Inc., 201 3rd Street Southeast, now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Okay, Council, this is from the Planning and Economic Development Committee, file number PC 6919, request for variation. So the issue right now is the applicant would like to vary the following. Take the north side yard requirement of 3.6 meters to be reduced to 1.5 meters, and the rear yard requirement of 7.5 meters to be reduced to 3.96 meters. Our alternatives, of course, to approve the variation or to deny the variation. Some of the background, CHB Development Inc. are applying for a variation order to allow the following, as I just mentioned. The house is situated on a lot that has streets on 3 sides of it. The applicant would like to modify the existing carport and making it into a garage. As well, the applicant would like to move the existing driveway from 3rd Street Southwest to Portage Avenue. The existing driveway will be closed off and a new curb cut permit will be required from city operations. Council, it is in an R1 residential single family zone. The application has been circulated to the various city departments. There have been no concerns. Public notices have been sent to all property owners with a 100-meter radius, and there's been no objections. With that said, On behalf of the committee and my recommendation, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of CHB Development, Inc. to vary the following. North side yard requirement of 3.6 meters to be reduced to 1.5 meters, and rear yard requirement of 7.5 meters to be reduced to 3.96 meters at the property known as 201 3rd Street Southeast, which is legally described as Lot 1, Block 14, Plan 21-428 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Okay, we'll open the hearing for conditional use PC 70-19. This is for 731-2483 Manitoba Limited, and this is for 601 Tupper Street North. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Your name, ma'am? Take the podium, please. Could you spell the name for the record, please?
Monica, last name is spelled Li.
Sorry. Excuse me, Your Worship, I would like to declare a conflict of interest in this situation and recuse myself, please.
Okay. And
Possible conflict.
Okay, and you're passing your chairmanship to your second?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Monica, and I'm here to speak for this conditional use. Currently, my tenant and client is renting out what used to be Centennial Hall. The location is 601 Tupper Street North. They are operating as a private pool hall currently, and with a liquor license allowed by Manitoba Liquor, which allows a minimum requirement of 12 tables. If we can have the conditional use approved under bar and tavern, this will allow them to reduce the number of tables. That's a possibility, and then possibly have more variation in the space that they're using, and have the option of reducing in size if they choose to, which would in turn reduce operating expenses and so on. Therefore, hopefully the city is in support of this. That would help sustain the current local business. Thank you.
Did council have any questions? Okay. Is there anyone else here to speak to the hearing? For or against? You speaking for or against, sir?
For.
For?
Yeah, we're the current tenants, Your Honor.
Okay, and your name for the record, sir?
Dave Kirkbride. Basically, what we're looking for is just a little more flexibility to try and grow our business. If we're not trying to grow it or improve it, then we're not really doing ourselves any justice or our clients any justice. So we're just looking to make things a little better. When we first started, we had some noise complaints. We had an employee that insisted on playing music very, very loud. That employee has been removed, and we've had no noise complaints since then. So we're just looking to smooth things out and, like I said, make things better for both the people around us, the people that come in, and ourselves.
Okay, did council have any questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Is there anyone else here to speak to the hearing? Come on up to the podium, please.
Sherry Blaylock, against.
Okay, thank you.
I get very nervous speaking in front of people. Now all of you are here, so forgive me. My voice will be shaking, I'm sure. As I stated on January in 2017, I'm not and still not against having a pool hall at 601 Tupper. However, I also said then that the logical trajectory was this was eventually going to be asked to become a bar, and that I was totally against that. I remain totally against that. I have no concerns with parking. I know that that's seems to be council's concern. My biggest concern is noise. The noise bylaw states that excessive sound is a serious hazard to public health and welfare, safety, and the quality of life, and people have a right to enjoy an environment free of excessive noise. This includes my bed. Don't take that the wrong way. 321 covers radios and stuff and sound producing devices in a residential district. Every Friday night during the school year, it seems to be during the school year, the music starts around 11 and goes till 2 a.m. This is excessive and a hazard not only to physical health, mine for starts, I don't get enough sleep, but also my mental health, which deteriorates. It takes me a couple days to get over this. What would happen if we had loud music going, if I had loud music going that others could hear through the walls 2 or 3 houses away? Would we be asked to turn it down? Would we get letters and our visits by the police? It's unreasonable to have this much noise that late at night. There have been more than 16 noise complaints in the past 19 months. This is not the amount of times that the noise has been excessive, just the amount of times, some of the times that the authorities have been called. It is not true that they have not had noise complaints recently. They have. I don't like calling in noise complaints because I think the RCMP have something better to do with their time. But like I said, this is for my own health. I was calling the RCMP. I was calling a counselor. They were telling me to call the other person. So after a while, I really had to give up. To give you an idea of how bad it is, I can tell when the sets of a band are over because the noise gets louder when the DJ takes over. This is a residential area, like your neighborhoods, with families, daycares, elders. Brent, last time you said that precedent had been set because the hall had been a venue for socials in the past, and I wasn't able to talk to that point. In the decade I lived there were maybe 2 or 3 socials. I can live with 2 or 3 socials every decade. Living with noise twice a week, every week, is a totally different matter on a totally different scale, in my opinion. Litter. Every time I mow my lawn behind my fence, I have to go through and pick up the litter first. This started last summer and has continued this summer. Before then, there was the odd piece here and there, no big deal, but now it's every single time, lots of pieces. Litter is empty cans of liquor of some sort, cigarette packages, straws, etc. There's also sometimes litter thrown over my back fence, but I don't know if that's from the bar. There's no doubt related to that, I guess, their grass is uncut and unruly. Around the fenced area they have, the grass is about 1 foot high. I couldn't take pictures because obviously there's snow. In the summertime, that entire area is absolutely covered in dandelions, and they let them seed out. They don't mow them, hundreds of them. My community, there's no doubt that there are concerns in the neighborhood. A street to the east, there was a shooting. A street to the west, there was a murder. I was going back to work at lunch once, and 2 police cars whizzed by for domestic assault a block away. This is a neighborhood on the edge, and one that we must all have a stake in keeping on the right side of that edge. Is this really a neighborhood that we want to bar in? I'm proud of my neighborhood. This is a residential area that used to have a few commercial properties in it that were mostly essential. A corner store for milk, a hall for the church, an ice cream shop, things that closed at a reasonable hour and didn't create noise. What we are seeing here is a bar, a noisy bar, complete with the 2 a.m. slamming of car doors, yelling and screaming of people I'm going to assume are under the influence of alcohol. Sometimes I lay there thinking, should I be calling for help, or is she just being dramatic? If I am sleeping at that time, it's awful to be woken up by someone screaming at 2 o'clock in the morning. Before the first conditional usage permit for them to start operating their pool hall, they had already had a multi-$1,000 payout pool tournament. Council didn't deliver any consequences for this. Now they have been operating for a bar for many months. Is that okay? They have been operating as a bar for many months. I know this because the whole members-only pool hall thing was either only lip service or a very short while, because I know people who go there, they're not members, they have gone there to party, and this is many, many months ago. They had a big New Year's bash as a bar. They sell everything there. Why don't the rules apply to this business? Now, you might be wondering, well, there's only one of you, Sherry, and I realize that. But next door to me is moving. It was only a 100-meter radius that got this letter. Across the street is working tonight. They didn't get a letter. They didn't know this hearing was happening. He is not in favor of a bar there. The other side of me are renters, as are those across the street from Smoke Break. I know that management has said to approve this, but I really hope that you take this to heart.
Okay, thank you. Did council have any questions?
Your worship,
Councillor Wall?
I was just wondering if the sound levels have been measured at all. I believe there are levels in the bylaw.
I didn't see any levels in the bylaw, but I don't have a measuring device to measure. I can tell you when I put my head on the pillow, all I hear is boom, 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 boom for 3 hours.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from council? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak against the motion? Did you come up to the podium, please? Could you state your name for the record, ma'am?
Janice Linz. Linz, L-Y-N-D-S. I live on the other side of Miss Blaylock, like on the other side of Tupper, and everything she said is basically true. Ever since Smoke Break has opened, I've noticed that I have broken beer bottles down my back lane, thrown in my backyard. The noise levels are bad on the weekends. It gets everybody's dog in the area barking because it's so loud. I don't know. Like I said, it used to be a quiet neighborhood, and now it's just noise all the time. I've lived there for 22 years, and I've never had broken beer bottles and stuff thrown in my yard and up against my fence. And I have never complained because I figured, okay, well, just give them a chance. But I think once it becomes a bar, it's just going to get worse.
Did council have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else here to speak against the motion? Okay. We're going to ask the applicant to come up and, if they want to, and address some of the concerns brought forward. Before we do that, I have a question for Mr. Brooks, if I could. The concerns around the liquor license, and is that's addressed by Manitoba Liquor Commission, is that right? Or does the city bylaw address that?
I'm not sure what issues you're talking about. If there's issues in regards to a private club, then yes, it would be liquor license, liquor and lotteries that would look after that, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I would just like to say that in regards to the noise, I know that when we first started, we did have some problems with noise. And as far as I knew, we had addressed that. At our last conditional use, I did give Sherry my number and told her that if she had any problems, she could feel free to call me. And I didn't receive a phone call, and I'm more than happy to work with her. I have no issues with that. And as far as broken beer bottles being thrown, we don't sell bottles. So those definitely didn't come from us. But if she has an issue with trash in your yard, give me a call. I'm happy to come and help clean it up. I have no problem with that whatsoever. We have our security out there at the end of the night. We try to keep things quiet. We try to keep things clean. Like I said, I have no problem if a neighbor's got a problem and thinks the trash came from our place, I have zero problem coming and helping them to clean that up. And like I said, further to the noise, we had an employee that was very difficult with that. That employee is no longer with us. If you have problems with the noise, feel free to call me. If we need to turn it down, we'll turn it down. That's not a tremendously large issue. And this conditional use isn't to try and further that stuff. We're just trying to do some different things and make some more money and get more people out. We're not trying to become louder. If anything, we're going to get quieter. that's what that's all about. We're not looking to become the cat and fiddle because we're not interested in that.
Did council have any questions? Councillor Knox?
I'm just curious, like, I'd like to hear sort of what your plans are to,
Our- Sorry, go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah,
and also secondary, how far along are you in the process of obtaining a tavern bar license?
We have not even started that because there's no point in starting before we get this. We're trying to do everything the right way. We want to focus a little more on food. We want to get people out earlier, get people to come out, watch a Jets game, watch a ball game, have something to eat, play some pool. But we don't want people to be coming there just to have to play pool. Want them to come and sit and enjoy themselves. And, you know, if they want to sit and watch a ball game, like I said, they can do that, or a hockey game, or come on playoffs, sit, have some wings, watch a Jets game, relax, and have a good time. Most of the people that come there have a good time and are relaxed, and we just want to further that.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council? Councillor Espy?
It seems like you're already operating a bar in the facility. Can you speak to that in the sense that when you originally came here and asked for a pool hall, it was presented in a way that it would be, you know, a private club where people went and played pool. But now there have been numerous noise complaints, and blaming one staff is okay, but you have the stuff in place for that to happen on a regular basis if someone turns a dial. Was it the intention all along to come back to us and ask for this? Because it didn't seem like that would have been your goal, and I'm not sure of why the ask for that now. Is it just so that people have more options than to play pool?
Yeah, no, that was never our plan to do stuff like that. It's not so much other than pool. We want them to be able to just sit there and relax, enjoy themselves. As it is now, they have to be playing pool.
They can't just go into the facility and do what you're proposing without playing pool? Like, are they asked to leave?
They have to play pool, or they have to be watching people play pool, yeah. So we're operating under the guidelines of the liquor and lotteries, and that's what they want us to do.
It's puzzling to me that, like, through the chair, of course, but this seems like a bit of a stretch for me. Like, why would somebody be asked to leave if they're...
It's not so much...
What am I missing?
It's not that they're asked to leave, but if they're sitting there and they don't want to play pool, they don't want to watch somebody play pool, we're not technically allowed. That's liquor and lotteries rule, not our rule. That's what our inspector told us.
Okay. Councillor Draycott, you had a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, respectfully, here I am through the joys of technology on your Facebook page, and it is not exactly what we had approved, and even what you represent this evening by your Facebook page representation. It is come down, enjoy this band, enjoy this DJ, relax, watch the game. This is what you're asking permission for, but this is what you're advertising on your public Facebook page.
Yeah, the liquor inspector told us that we could have bands to enhance our customer experience, and that's what she told us if we wanted to get more people in to do that.
Okay, so what is the means of going through this process? Because when we originally gave you the ability of opening Smoke Break, it was the statement that this will not become a bar.
Yeah, we don't want to be a bar.
So explain to me the difference between a bar, a closed, private-only, or members-only establishment, and a tavern, as I don't understand the difference.
The members only it's very strict guidelines, and the liquor license tells us that we could have a band in, we can have a DJ, we can have people in there to play pool, and that's all we can do.
So
a tavern, it just gives you more options to do different things. We can focus a lot more on food and just an overall general kind of a sports bar type feel.
Okay.
Sports lounge, sorry, to be more appropriate.
So again, through the joys of Facebook, I'm strolling back to September 9th before I see a post about playing pool.
Yeah, our focus isn't to advertise the pool so much because we believe that people know that that's pool. I mean, it's in the name, right? Smoke, bake, billiards.
So what do you have to do to become a member at the moment?
You just have to come in and get your name. People can come in and be a member for a day. That's another thing that the liquor inspector told us.
So you are an open to everyone establishment.
Not necessarily open to everyone. We're still a private club, but people can come in and we get their name. We get everybody's name that comes in.
Okay. Thank you for your answer.
Yep.
Okay, any further questions from council? Councillor Knox?
Your worship, not a question, just a point of, I do understand how our LGA works, and where the way a private club works is that anybody who is with somebody needs to be a guest of a member. So when they talk about people coming in and watching people play pool, it means they need to be with somebody who is a member.
But I could become a member tonight for the night.
Yes.
Any further questions from council? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No, you're not, thank you. Were there any letters to be read into the record? Okay, I need a motion to close the hearing, please.
Thank you. I'll move to close public hearing for conditional use PC 70-19 for 731-2483 Manitoba Limited or 601 Tupper Street North.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Draycott. Questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? And that's defeated.
So that is just simply for to close the public hearing. Now we'll deal with the actual conditional use. That we just closed the hearing just now.
You're right. Yes. We should clarify that.
Yes.
Yes. So,
I will move again to close the public hearing, and then we will move into the resolution.
Councillor
Okay?
Draycott, second again.
Thank you.
All those in favor? That's carried.
Okay, I think, and I will be moving to support this simply to get this resolution on the table, and then we can open up for discussion. But I think we do know what the item is up for discussion here. So I do move and resolve that the City of Portage la Prairie, Council City of Portage la Prairie approve the conditional use of 731-2483 Manitoba Limited to allow an operation of a bar or tavern with up to 12 pool tables in a C1 neighborhood commercial zone at the property located at 601 Tupper Street North, which is legally described as Lot A, Planned 1389, Parish of Portage la Prairie, with the condition that the applicant provide a written long-term parking agreement with the Korean Catholic Church and that the City of Portage la Prairie register this agreement against the properties. And so that's moved for our discussion.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Buds?
Thank you. So I did support this original application when we went through this process, and I do know that there was lots of conversation about the intentions of this property and what was going to be going on there. And I think I stand by that decision. I think when we look at the change in this, where we move this into the bar and the tavern scene, that is beyond my comfort level for that location, simply because the latitude that's given with that conditional use far exceeds kind of the original intention. And, you know, I think we've had some discussion over what's actually happening there and what could happen there. But I am mindful of the location where it is and surrounding properties. So I will not be supporting this conditional use application.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. Councillor Espy?
Very similar comments when I originally supported the pool hall. what I supported and what it seems to have turned into are not the same thing. That being said, I don't think a bar belongs in that neighborhood with residences so close by, and I will not be supporting this.
Councillor Draycott?
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, I've heard numerous concerns in the community about the establishment and how it's running at the moment. As councillors have already stated this evening, when we did approve this, my thought process would be that this would be a nice, quiet facility that you could go to play pool as it was presented to us. And I am disappointed to hear some of the steps that have been taken to create a more relaxed atmosphere, if that's what we're calling it. I will not be supporting this motion this evening, and I hope that this establishment is working towards the safety of the neighborhood that it is in.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from council? Okay, we've got a motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? And that's defeated. Okay, we'll open the conditional use hearing for PC 71-19. This is for Justin and Andrea McCabe at 102 First Street Southwest.
Your Worship, to avoid even a hint of conflict, I'd like to recuse myself from this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wall? Okay, is there anyone here present that would like to speak in favor of the application? Take the podium, ma'am. And Andrea, your name for the record, please?
Andrea McCabe.
And Justin? Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Originally, we had applied for a height variation in May of 2018, which was approved. Then we had a 2.5-month delay for our hydro to be put in. We had to pay for the line to be directionally bored from the street to the building, which in turn enhanced the service line and pole to the property behind us. Then we applied for R2 rezoning, and at that point it was pointed out that this was not possible as a wall or ceiling was not connected to the main house. At this point, we willingly stopped construction on the proposed suite. In preparation for the conditional use hearing today, we invited all of our neighbors within 100 meters, approximately 40 homes in total. We had 7 people attend and 6 people wrote in letters of support. The 7th person was one of the neighbors that have a concern. We gave our email address for those that could not attend to let us know if they had any questions, concerns, or comments. There were no questions or concerns, just positive comments which have been submitted. We didn't ask for letters of support. One of the concerns from the neighboring properties was the potential for their privacy to be invaded. You can see more from the public road access and city sidewalks on all 3 of these properties than from the proposed building. 2 sides of our building are located beside garages. We can see more from our house than from the proposed suite. We've worked hard to ensure that the new building complemented the main house by reclaiming the brick from the original carriage house. And we will continue to improve and enhance our property, which we feel will only add additional value to our neighborhood. And our intended use for this property is for a mother-in-law suite. So it'll be a single occupant senior citizen. She spends her winters in Mesa or Mexico. So we feel that this will also increase the supply of affordable senior housing in our city and affordable infill housing in the core area. That's all I have.
Okay. Council have questions? So I had a question. So just your timeframes again, May 2018,
Yes.
and what happened then?
So we applied for a height variation, and then we were waiting for hydro to be directionally, or we were going back and forth with hydro because the hydro line was about 10 feet off the ground, and it ran through our property, and it services the people behind us. So we were waiting back and forth with them, and then finally they were able to push it in. And then at that time, that's when we applied for the R2.
And what was the approximate date when you applied for the R2?
I don't remember that off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Buds had a question.
So, sorry, just one question. So, in your presentation, you had made comment about, what your intentions were and the construction that was underway and the timeline. Was it the intention from the initial construction to construct a secondary suite?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other people here to speak in favor of the application? Final call. Anybody else to speak in favor of the application? Okay. We have some letters for the record. I'll ask those to be read into the record at this time.
The first letter is from Owen McKenzie. While residing at 6 Dufferin Avenue West, now approximately 3 decades, having moved in from a large and private acreage in the Portage RM, Burnside, our family has been receptive to changes to the adjacent and neighboring properties. Just as our own upgrades or enlargements to our home were accepted, I presume these changes were recognized as suiting our family needs and dreams, and so too is this most recent proposal. Over these past decades, we have witnessed quite a variety of different construction looks to suit various people's and their wishes. Yes, living in close proximity to other folks is less private, but balanced with enrichment of a positive, supportive, and progressive neighborhood. I feel fortunate to live where we are. This is but one more change to our neighborhood that I support in the spirit of being urban community. Thank you, Board, for the opportunity to share my perspective. Owen McKenzie. The next letter is from Paula McKenzie. I, Paula McKenzie of 6 Dufferin Avenue West, will be away at the time of this meeting, but would like to make a few comments. We have lived in this neighborhood at 6 Dufferin Avenue West since November 1992. The one thing we love about our neighborhood is that it attracts people who care for one another and care for their homes and yards. We are thankful to all our neighbors for working together to create such a wonderful neighborhood. History first. It is not new to our neighborhood to have suites for multiple residents on one property. Example, 5 Dufferin Avenue West, the Armstrong House on the Crescent, and the 8-plex on First Street. The property west of us, now known as 60, 62, and 64 Dufferin Avenue West, was once an old home made into multiple suites. It was neglected by the owner and over time deteriorated and eventually had to be demolished, leaving a dirt lot for years. We were thankful to Chris Beers, who purchased the property and built the now existing triplex, which is a welcome addition to our neighborhood and has brought great neighbors into our area. Next, recent concerns of 2 properties in our neighborhood. 5 Dufferin Avenue West. This property is also an old residence that was converted into multiple suites. In the 27 years that we have lived here, we have had good neighbors live in those suites across the street from us. The last few years, we have been concerned as we watch the exterior deteriorate. We are thankful to Rhonda Lodwick, the new owner and landlord, for making the much-needed repairs and improvements. It is appreciated, I'm sure, by the residents and our neighborhood. Number 2, 102 First Street, the property of the application PC 7119. This large house is adjacent to the above multiple dwelling property, 5 Dufferin Avenue West. We were concerned about this property as it had a for sale sign on it for a few years and the owners weren't able to live in it full time. We were thankful when it was sold and the new owners, Justin and Andrea McCabe, began taking care of the property and making improvements. I believe they are benefiting our neighborhood. One little example is in the care of the hedge. It is now easier and safer to walk on the sidewalks alongside the well-kept hedge. I acknowledge that to have a suite or not does not affect us directly, but it does affect us indirectly. Neighborhoods are always changing. Since we already have multiple suites in our neighborhood, to have one more suite won't make a big difference in traffic or population to our neighborhood. But because it is a new suite, I believe it will attract positive neighbors into our community. I believe that McCabe's or any future owner will be discerning of the tenant that would live in this proposed suite, since it is in such close proximity to their own home. As Portage grows and new subdivisions are being created, I am thankful to all our neighbors for the care they have given to their homes and yards, creating a pleasant and safe neighborhood for us to live in and to attract others to come join our community and keep it viable. In conclusion, the above comments are why I do consider the proposed suite a positive improvement to our neighborhood and believe it should be allowed. Sincerely, Paula McKenzie. The next one was an email from Daryl Giffen. We think this proposed suite is an excellent idea. It is a great way for elderly parents to live close to their kids but not with them. We would like to see more people doing something like this. You definitely have our support. Daryl and Marilyn Giffen. And that was an email sent to Justin and Andrea. The next one is also an email sent to Justin and Andrea. Thank you for the tour of your proposed secondary suite. We think your new building is an improvement to your property and the neighborhood and look forward to having your mom, mother-in-law as our neighbor, Bob and Jean Demon. And that's it. In favor.
That's all the letters in favor. Okay, thank you. This time I'd like to ask if there's anyone present to speak against the application. You want to take the podium, sir?
Yes, I have the presentation.
Okay.
Will you run that for me, Diane?
It'll be from over that side of the table. Do you want the mouse or do you want her to just advance it?
I'll ask for the next slide. Thank you for this opportunity, Your Worship. My name is Leonard Rossnagel. This is Elena Rossnagel, and I am also presenting, we live at 151 Tupper Street South, backing on the applicant's property. I am also presenting on behalf of Ken Neufeld and Diana Meseton Neufeld of 20 Crescent Road West. Their property is directly to the south of the applicant's. And here is the view from their yard. I am also representing Dave Judson and Laurie Carlson Judson of 10 Crescent Road West. They are to the southeast of the applicant's property. We all participated in the preparation of this presentation, but I'm delivering it. Next slide, please. So I thought it would be rather instructive to go through the timeline here because you've already had a bit of a preview to that. It's rather twisted. It was great to see new neighbors who promised to rejuvenate the neglected property behind us. When approached about a garage with second-story storage, I supported it to replace the falling down garage that was there. The only plans we ever saw was the not-to-scale footprint sketch for the variance hearing. And you can see on the record that I actually spoke in favor of that. We allowed the applicant's trades access to our property for ladders and scaffolding. To facilitate relocation of overhead utility lines, we had trees extensively trimmed and removed. And I know this troubled my wife. We thought we would have our tree screen replaced with a blank garage wall. There were considerable challenges with Manitoba Hydro in relocating lines. While on vacation, Mr. McCabe informed me that Hydro would install the new pole on his property directly adjacent to our side yard, as opposed to the pole that was hidden behind our garage. I denied Hydro permission to enter my property to install that pole. Now, next slide, please. There we go. Okay, so I tried to do my homework here. So I obtained copies of the building permits and plans from the Portage Planning District on October the 4th, 2019. Your Worship, this is from the second page of the RAF plans submitted with a permit application. And I have a copy here. And I would draw your attention to the first point under code review. This slab is intended for a residential storage garage. It is not intended to be an inhabited space. Next slide, please. So here are the plans that I am told were submitted with the permit application. I must emphasize that the first time any of us in the neighborhood saw these plans was 10 days ago, when I obtained copies of them along with the building permits. Note the outside staircase to the second story, many windows, and second-story patio, complete with double patio doors. Next slide, please. So I've obtained copies of the building permit, which I held up here, and plans which I have summarized. I must emphasize the last point. Requirements/conditions. Garage with storage above. If used for something else in the future, plans to be supplied. I am informed that the Portage la Prairie Planning District never received any further plans for the second story, nor was a plumbing permit ever issued. Now, we all likely know that Mrs. McCabe is Councillor Wall's daughter. Mrs. McCabe is also Assistant Chief Administrative Officer of the RM of Portage la Prairie. Your Worship, the applicants knew or ought to have known the process for building permits. Next slide, please. I just wanted to have you know that that's a scan of part of the permit, and I just wanted to show that the bold cap statement is right on the permit with the same emphasis as in my previous slide. Next slide, please. So, summer 2018 construction. As construction progressed, the garage with the storage above began to look more like a house with a first-story garage. The balcony overlooking Newfeld's yard, exterior stairway and entrance, many windows, interior wall framing, plumbing stack, plumbers on site for many days. Neighbors never saw plans, so we could only guess at the final structure and its purpose. One comment was that we had been duped. Newfelds were shocked to see a balcony overlooking their water garden and patio area. We were dismayed to see window openings on our side of the garage looking down into our 4 west windows that had always been private. As a neighborhood, we are saddened that this project has brought us so much worry. Next slide, please. And here's something from the Portage Planning District's website. Can I have windows in my walls? Windows and other openings, and this is for a detached garage, not a suite, detached garage. Windows and other openings, including doors, are only permitted in a wall if the wall is 4 feet or more from the property line of the adjoining property. And it goes on, and then the above requirements for fire ratings of walls and placement of windows or other openings in these walls are designed to limit fire spread between buildings on adjoining lots. So the garage is less than 3 feet from the property line. We had therefore expected a blank wall facing us and were justifiably shocked to see windows being installed. 3 on our side. Next slide, please. So, I must confess, I do not always read the City Council minutes and agendas. Thanks to Mickey Dumont's rezoning a bit late opinion piece on September the 25th, we were alerted to the fact that our suspicions were true. Mr. McCabe was completing siding on the wall facing us. We had been neighborly and given him blanket permission to use our property in his construction. On September the 25th, my wife requested that he no longer use our property until the rezoning was resolved. He replied then we would be looking at an unfinished wall. Mr. McCabe ignored my wife's requests and trespassed on our property and finished the siding anyway. Next slide, please. So, I had hoped to play a video clip of former Councillor Brent Fraser's comments at the first reading of the zoning amendment. But despite Diane's best efforts, the technology has defeated me. But here are a couple of direct quotes from him. And I'm quoting directly, "I am not sure how to express my dissatisfaction with this file, but this is a case, I believe, the process has been hijacked in a way that the building's already built, and now they're asking for zoning to allow it, and I'm not sure how to show any approval of that method of doing business." End quote. And he goes on to say, quoting again, "I think the intent to put a residence was clear from the outset. I don't think it was ever meant to be a garage with storage. So I think the whole process has been badly used." End quote. Next slide, please. So the single property has 2 separate dwellings rather than residences attached as in a duplex. Therefore, this property did not qualify, and the Portage Planning District recommended against proceeding. And council agreed. Next slide. So now we get to September the 9th and the zoning bylaw amendment, the secondary suites bylaw. We were never opposed to a new bylaw as such. We were opposed to it being used in an underhanded way to legalize a methodically planned and carried out illegal build. Despite our strong objections, the bylaw, as proposed in its entirety, was passed. Next slide, please. So, this all brings us to today. We respectfully urge Council to reject this application. Council must not reward this illegal build by accommodating it under this bylaw. This illegally built structure does not fit in this bylaw. It is way too big. The rear yard is way too small. The side yard is too small. The engineer's drawings prohibit the slab from being used for an inhabited space. Even a garage with windows must be 4 feet from the property line. This is designed to limit fire spread to buildings on adjoining lots. Ken Neufeld and Diana Meziton Neufeld's attached garage with windows facing across the property line. Their addition meets all bylaw requirements. We urge Council to reject this conditional use and enforce the building permit of June the 26th, 2018, specifying a garage with second floor storage. And, Your Worship, I have one more significant point that I just discovered after I had prepared this presentation. Last Wednesday, I made plans to put a fence along our property line. We've had people walk through the back there, and we wanted to make that more difficult. So my wife had found a copy this summer of the survey provided to us when we purchased our house in 1990. I have it here. So it was pretty straightforward. The corners of my garage are 11.95 feet from either corner, so to my property line. So I carefully measured out, put down stakes, dropped a line, and I noticed that the above structure is not parallel to the property line. You could move it to that next slide, please. I got 30 inches at the one corner, so okay. At the other corner, I get 21 inches. With a soffit overhang from the plans of 24 inches and 5 or 6 inch eaves troughs, I don't know what they are, I calculate an encroachment on my property of 8 or 9 inches. Here's another reason to turn down this conditional use. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rossnagle. Did council have any questions for Mr. Rossnagle? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak against the application? Come on up and take the podium.
Your worship and councillors, thank you. I'm Lori Carlson Judson, and this is Ken Neufeld. As you're all aware from our letter read at the previous council meeting and from Leonard's presentation just now, Ken and Diana, and Leonard and Elena, and Dave and I have been dealing with this violation of Portage Building Code as it pertains to the McCabe property. Today, we have a petition signed by neighbors within the 100 meters of the McCabe property requesting the city to deny their request for conditional use of their R1 property, as well as their request for 3 more variances in order to legalize their 2-car garage with storage to a second residential unit on their single-family property. We, the petitioners, and that's 30-plus neighbors who we estimated received notices for these additional requests, are infuriated that this build was planned not as a garage with storage, but as a residential property from the very start, as evidenced by that blueprint for one piece. We're disgusted with this clearly and methodically planned blatant abuse to circumvent the laws that everyone is expected to follow, including those who declined to sign the petition for personal reasons. No neighbors objected to the original variance request. Nobody imagined that our goodwill and our trust would be taken advantage of to such a degree, and in such an underhanded and deceptive action. In speaking with our neighbors, I did note that one neighbor was opposed. He was angered by the idea of a petition, and he stated that having to get a variation every time he wanted to do something on his property, it angered him because the city should have no right to tell him what he can or can't do on his own property. Clearly, chaos would result if everybody held this view and ignored the bylaws that have been put in place. The planning department is to ensure the well-being of all property owners, not just the applicants who want to bend the rules. We are standing in solidarity, and while not every petitioner is impacted to the same degree, support for neighbors and the expectations that we all follow the bylaws that are there to protect us as property owners has united us. So we do not support the approval of these requests, the conditional use nor the variance. I'll hand you both petitions, and we do not want to see that as a way to legalize or legitimize this build. Thank you. Who would I give the petitions to?
I can take it.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. I would read also that the petitions are notice of hearing of application of conditional use, first of all. The petition to have City Council deny the conditional use application file number PC 7119 submitted by Justin and Andrea McCabe of 102 First Street Southwest, who are requesting the city to allow for a secondary suite above the existing detached garage. We, the undersigned, eligible voters, property owners, in receipt of the notice of hearing application for conditional use dated September 25th at the City of Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, petition the Portage la Prairie City Council to deny the owners of this property permission to use their previously constructed detached garage as living quarters in perpetuity. Shall I read the one for the variation? You can have that ahead of time, or shall I wait?
No, that's for the next hearing.
Okay.
Yep. Did members of council have questions for the presenters? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak against the application? Mr. Fraze, can you come up and state your name for the record, please?
My name is Brent Fraze. Sorry, I have a cold. You know how to spell that? I'm here not so much to comment on the quality or nature of the project in question. It looks great. It's a beautiful building. I think the purpose of having a secondary suite in a neighborhood is probably a commendable thing. I do, however, as I did when I was on council and expressed some frustration with the process, continue to have some deep frustrations with the process. I want to also take some personal responsibility for the way this has played out. Whenever the first public notice was sent out for the first variance request, I received one as a neighbor within 100 meters. I looked at it, and I'm quite capable of reading plans. I'm a builder by trade, and this plan didn't alarm me. The reason I think that I won't use the word dupe, but that I failed to recognize what was happening is that the plan didn't properly reflect what was being built. The only sketch we got, which was not a plan that showed elevations or floor plans, was a site plan of the existing building taken possibly from Google Earth with the existing little carriage house in fallen down state, drawn out in its actual size with a couple of little notes that I could barely discern, asking for a variance on side yard and setback. Now, I had to do a little interpretation to figure out what that meant. And as it turns out, it didn't even come close to reflecting the actual construction that occurred. The footprint of the garage after it was built, or residence, what it's now called, was much, much larger than the sketch that we were shown on the notice to neighbors. And that's a part of the process that needs some work. I think there ought to be a bigger attempt to make people's intentions clear. And whether that's through the original drawings submitted by the applicant or whether it's through the planning department's reinterpretation of them. But when neighbors get notices, and many of them are not as skilled as I am at reading plans and converting metric to feet and inches and trying to figure out what that all means. But the notice we got in no way came close to reflecting what was about to happen. So it didn't send any alarms to me to stand up and say, whoa, wait a minute, what are they building? And so I take some responsibility, both as a neighbor that didn't do my homework and as a counselor that passed approved the variance anyway, in spite of, I should have known. I should have redrawn the footprint myself, and then I would have seen, we've got a problem. So I don't have a better answer now than I had when I was on council as to what to do with the file. I'm suggesting that if the practice being applied here is that it's easier sometimes to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission, well, yeah, that's a way of operating. Maybe not the way a city council should operate, but it does happen. And when it does, it would make most sense for the people needing the forgiveness to actually ask for it. It seems a little arrogant to not even bother asking or acknowledging that the process was flawed from the beginning, to simply try to make it all go away by meeting some newly approved variances. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fraze. Is there anyone else here to speak against the motion? Okay. There's some letters to be read into the record. I'll ask for those now.
The first letter is from Lori Collier and Jim Brands. To whom it may concern, we are writing to express our concerns with the application for variation of bylaw number 10-8492 and the application for conditional use under bylaw number 10-8492. In our opinion, this building was constructed in defiance of the existing laws in a dishonest manner. Neighbors were led to believe that a garage with storage was being constructed using a similar footprint to the old garage that had stood there before. Not only are we concerned with how close the new building now is to the neighbor to the south of the property, but also with the suite's balcony overlooking the southern neighbor's backyard. It is an unfortunate situation because if the applicant had been clear and straightforward about his intentions to begin with, perhaps the building, which is very attractive and appropriate to the age of the neighborhood, could have been set back further from the property line. This would have prevented the conflict and upset that this has caused in our neighborhood. In addition, we believe that this issue is important for the whole city because of process. If someone constructs a building without following the proper procedure and then simply applies for a variance after the fact, why should anyone have to follow bylaws or codes when they build? No one should be exempt from existing bylaws or procedures. They exist for a reason, and this is why we are not in favor of these applications for variation and conditional use. Thank you for your attention in this matter. Sincerely, Lori Collier and Jim Brands. And the last letter of objection is from Percy J. Phillips. To the City of Portage Conditional Use Board. When the initial variation was circulated for the structure, it was for a residential garage with a large storage area above it. I will assume that the city granted the owner and the builder for a building permit for a garage with storage above it only. Otherwise, the application for conditional use would not be required. Whether it was intended from day one or if the decision was authentically made during the construction process, what was constructed under the granted permit was a garage with an independent living quarters above it, an apartment or a secondary suite on the property. Now the City of Portage has circulated the 2 notices of hearing for the Conditional Use Board applications by the owners granting permission for the suite to be used and occupied, PC 71-19 and secondly PC 72-19. A variance to acknowledge as a suite it is too close outside of the current regulations on 2 sides for the current regulations to the south and east property lines as a suite, and PC 72-19 indicates that the suite as constructed is not 75 square meters, but actually 90.6 square meters. The facts are these. The building was constructed without an accurate final use permit. It's a garage with a suite on it rather than a garage with storage on it. It is larger than the original permit. Otherwise, there is no reason for one of the reasons in PC 72-19, and the structure is constructed closer than the regulations allow for a suite on 2 sides of the property. My questions are these. Number 1, why was the owner not simply issued a stop order as soon as it was clear during construction it was a suite over a garage rather than a storage space? Note, I would expect the process to be a new permit would have to be applied for after a stop order is issued. If a new and accurate building permit was granted for a suite above the garage, the other issues, like the distance from the property lines, would have been made clear and would have been adhered to. 2, if these current variances are granted, how can any future variance application requested by anyone else in Portage la Prairie for the same general intent not be granted? That would be for a building for a purpose other than what is on the original building permit. a suite over an existing or in construction garage, or a secondary suite on a Portage property too close to the property line. My objection is to the process that got us to the current position of the applicants, the requirement for the hearings of the Variation Board and Conditional Use Boards. This build or construction should never have come to this. The requirement for variances to allow building constructed without the correct permits and too close to the property lines for approval by the City of Portage. By doing so, the City of Portage la Prairie has compromised and cast doubt upon the entire process of building permits, inspection, and occupancy permits, and doing so in an equal and even-handed manner for all who apply. It is clear that the issuing of building permits, the original and the modified one, if one was issued, that allowed the building to be completed, the inspection of the build while in construction, and the final result certainly falls outside normal practice, as does this hearing, no matter the results of the hearing is and the decision that this hearing and board makes. Respectfully submitted, Percy J. Phillips.
Okay, so that's all the letters against the application read into the record. Okay. This time, allow the applicants to respond to any of the concerns that have been brought forward, if you wish. Mr. McCabe, no? Okay. No, if you or Andrea want to respond to any of the concerns brought forward?
One thing I'd like to say is that I agree that we should have applied for the R2 sooner than we did, and I apologize for that. Initially, we wanted to get the height variation, and then right after that, apply for the R2, but that didn't happen, so.
I ask you to use the mic, please.
The reason for that was that we were at a standstill on the build anyways because hydro was not able to put hydro through, so we had a 2.5 month delay. As soon as the hydro was pushed through and we're able to do that, that's when we did apply for the R2.
Okay. Any further items you'd like to address that were brought forward? Councillor Knox, you had a question?
So just explain to me, because when Andrea was asked the question that it was always meant to be a suite, why would you apply for a different permit under a false that it was going to be storage? And remember, I'm new at this, so explain away to me, because...
We should have done it right from the beginning. We should have done it together, but we wanted to get the height variation first to see if that was...
We weren't able to do it together because without the height variance, we weren't able to do the suite. So until we have the height variance, we can't do the suite. So once the height variance was applied for and it was approved, then we're able to move forward with the R2. But in that short period of time, hydro wasn't able to put the hydro through because Mr. Rossnagel told me we weren't able to put a pole there. So they had a 2.5 month delay before they could get the digger through to put it through. So there's no point in us paying for that permit in that period when we were not doing any construction anyways, knowing that what we have to do is have the height variance before we can apply for the suite. So without the height variance, we can't do a suite.
Councillor Knox? That answer your question?
Yes, for now. For now.
Councillor Espy, you had a question?
I guess I'm just having trouble piecing this together. If the intention was to build the suite all along, why wasn't that intention at least made verbally to council when we asked that question?
I don't know that it was asked. So at that time, there was a question and answer period, and all we were applying for was for a height variance at the time, because without it, we can't apply for a suite. So why would we apply for a suite if we can't get the height?
We should have applied for a suite, is what we should have done.
Councillor Meyer, you had a question?
If you don't mind, Your Worship, thank you. Again, I'm a little bit confused. So you had applied it to be an R2, and that was turned down?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I guess the question, oh, it wasn't turned down? I'm sorry.
Applied for a height variance.
Well, no, we
Well,
applied for an R2 and it was turned down. Yeah, they did,
There was-
because they're in an R2, the way that it was zoned originally
Right.
in the zoning bylaw, it said that it had to have a wall or a ceiling attached to the main house. So that made it not qualify.
There was no application available to do anything like this at the time unless we were to adjoin it to the house, which is something that we could potentially do if we would like to. But the first step was a height variance. So without the height variance,
I get that.
once we had that in place, then we could either join it to the house and apply for what application is available now, which is R2.
So, on September the 24th, 2018, it says to commence a zoning amendment process by rezoning the above listed property from R1 residential single family to R2 residential two family. You'd applied for the rezoning, and the rezoning didn't happen, is that?
That's correct. It didn't happen because it didn't
Sorry.
qualify.
Can,
So you want to direct a question to
he would like to maybe further
Mr.
explain
Brooks?
If Mr.
Go ahead.
Brooks could
I'll
clarify
just
for me.
explain the rezoning application. The rezoning application was applied for, and we got partway through the process and realized that you cannot have an R2 for that particular place because they were not joined buildings. For it to be an R2, they had to be joined. So then we refunded the money for the R2 zoning, and it did not get anywhere. It was just taken off the books.
Got it. Okay. So, can I ask a follow-up question, Your Worship? So I guess just at that point in time, why would you continue with construction, not knowing that there was, or did construction
No, we
stop
didn't.
at that
We
point in time?
stopped the inside totally.
And any of the neighbors that were able to come and do a viewing that are somewhere here, and they can see that it is just stick framed inside, just empty. There's nothing there.
And that was September the
still
24th,
today.
2018?
It's still today.
So nothing's moved since September 24th, 2018?
And there was never a stop order put in place. We willingly did no further construction on it.
Councillor Draycott? You had a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, I'm not sure who is best to answer this question at the moment, so I'm not sure if this is the best time. I would like to ask the McCabe's if they could answer it, and possibly Mr. Brooks. I realize that's not the right time for that to happen, but part of the process in putting a new bylaw in place was because garages are not meant to be residential structures. There are fire concerns, and that was addressed in adding secondary buildings on a garage as a secondary suite. Is your building up to code for residential use at the moment for fire protection?
It's not been completed inside, so once we know what code is, then we'll complete it to what that satisfactory order is. If it's to do with side lot and side yard, at one point on one of the side yards, we are 62 inches in one corner. And then it's also a brick fence between the two yards, as well as a stucco building that is approximately 5 feet away.
So I am not up to code, and perhaps that is why this might be a follow-up question in our discussion. So I asked the mayor if you would like me to hold my follow-up question until our discussion.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Through your worship, yes. So are you saying, in one of the presentations, it said that there had been plumbers at working there? Is there plumbing upstairs?
There's no completed plumbing
It's
in the
roughed
building.
in, like it's roughed in to,
And is it true that no permits have been pulled for that?
I'm not sure what permits are there for plumbing or not plumbing, to be honest with you.
But did,
There is no water running in the building.
no.
but no permits have been pulled, which should be done before you start plumbing.
I
Yeah.
believe
Right.
there was a permit, or I don't know if there was a
I
permit
think
or not.
that's
I think there was
when,
question about permit, but I don't recall if there's a permit on it.
So I believe that, I thought that the plumber had gone to pull a permit, but then we were told, that's when we were told to stop.
Can I ask who your plumber was?
Keith Knox.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from council? Okay, thank you for the presentation. Okay, need a motion to close the public hearing?
So be it resolved, and I so move that the public hearing for conditional use PC 7119 for for Justin and Andrea McCabe at 102 First Street Southwest now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Draycott. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Okay, Council. You've heard the discussion. This is from the Planning and Economic Development Committee, file number PC 7119. The issue in front of us is to allow for a secondary suite above the existing detached garage. Alternatives, we can approve the conditional use application as presented. We can approve the conditional use application with conditions, or to deny the conditional use application. As you've heard some of the background, Justin and Andrea McCabe have applied for a conditional use to allow for a secondary suite above the existing detached garage. This is now located in an R1 residential single-family zone. The applicant has also applied for a variance to allow for the size of the secondary suite to be increased and that the side and the rear yards to be decreased. Applicant is aware that if the conditional use is not approved, then the variance would not be approved as well. This application was circulated to various city departments. There have been no concerns. Public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius, and we've heard the ones in favor and against tonight in addition to a petition. So it's the recommendation of this committee, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the conditional use application of Justin and Andrea McCabe to allow for a secondary suite above the existing detached garage in a R1 residential single-family zone at the property 102 First Street Southwest, which is legally described as Lot 3, Block 1, Plan 1998, Parish of Portage la Prairie, conditional upon approval being received for variation PC 7219.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Knox.
I have a question for Mr. Brooks. Just from the presentation we saw earlier, when did you receive that drawing of the garage with the deck and the double doors and all of that?
We would have received, we received some initial drawings in May, showing it without any windows on the east elevation in early May, and then we received another one in the middle of May, showing the same thing, without any walls or without any windows on it. And then we issued a permit for the garage aspect of it in end of June, so we would have got them sometime beginning to middle of June, probably, of 19. Sorry, no, sorry, of 18, sorry.
Just follow up. So was there questions? Did it raise any red flags for you, just sort of the look of the structure with the double doors and the deck when it came to being a storage space?
The only access to the upper deck was from the outside, so you had to have a set of stairs on the outside to get up to it.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Other questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Meyer?
I'd like to make a comment and then reserve a follow-up question for later, if possible. I just want to just state for the record that I am as well a property owner within a 100-meter radius of the property. And I did receive a letter, of course, from the planning district in regards to not only the conditional use, but to the variation. I just want to state for the record that any decision I make for or against tonight has nothing to do with that. Even though I'm within that 100-meter area, I was not aware of the petition. Never seen it, never was approached on it, but I just wanted the council to be aware that it is in my neighborhood. So,
okay. Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Worship. If I could have my follow-up question now to Mr. Brooks. Given fire code and regulation, are you aware if this building is currently to fire code in terms of structure?
As a detached garage, he could be if the windows were taken out of that east side. The south side has to be looked at a little more because it does go on an angle, but it's probably pretty close to being allowed like that. So as a detached garage without the windows there, yes, it would be okay.
As a residence?
As a residence, he would have to fire rate the residential aspect of it. He'd have to do some fire rating between the garage and the residence, sound rating and fire rating. And he would have to do some fire rating on the exterior wall, on the interior of the exterior wall, so the east wall, and possibly the south wall. And then there's some criteria on what you can have for siding on those walls as well because of the distance you are to the property line.
Is there any difference between a garage and a secondary suite in terms of structure, the wood that's used, or the size of your studs, or anything like that?
The only aspect that makes a difference is the residential use has to be meet certain criteria for insulation values. Other than that, the rest of the wood does not matter.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Buds.
Thank you. So this file is not a new file to many of us that have been at this table before, and for those of us who have been on the Planning District Board. And so, from my perspective, I think our approval of secondary suites is a proactive step in our city to have a good feel of how those are handled in our city. So I stand behind that. I also stand behind the initial application here for a detached garage, and I also sat in several meetings where there were conversations about the intended use of this particular building, and did have conversations directly at board meetings with Mr. Brooks about confirming intended use. And all along, Mr. Brooks and from communication with the applicant had indicated that this is a storage facility and that there was no intention to have it as a secondary suite. And that is what I believe to be the case from the information that we gleaned. And so disappointed to hear tonight when we do hear that from the very onset that this was intended to be a secondary suite. So that is contradictory to what my belief was when this process was underway. So I will not be supporting this conditional use application tonight for many reasons, not just because of the misinterpretation, but for many reasons. As we know that now there's variation. I think the process in our application, the lens that we would have looked at through this would have been differently. It would have been different if we would have had that information at the onset.
Other questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Knox?
Yeah, this is a new learning experience for me for sure. I would like to reiterate the same thing too, that it is disappointing because, in my opinion, I think the structure is aesthetically pleasing. It's beautiful, in my opinion, completely. But it went about by the wrong way, not following the process, not following what's in place for applications. And in that regard, I can't support it because I do believe that it was applied for as a storage facility. If it had been applied for, even with the intention of saying that it would have been not a secondary suite, but a residential suite, this could have been a completely different situation. So.
Thank you, Councillor Knox. Any further questions or comments from council? Councillor Draycott?
Thank you, Worship. I would say as well that I'm disappointed. I actually voted against the bylaw that was presented last council reason, and I did state in that council meeting why I voted against that. I did not vote against this structure in that council meeting. I as well find this structure very aesthetically pleasing. I find most of the concerns of the neighborhood to be legitimate concerns. Unfortunately, when you live in the city, any city, you do lose an element of privacy. I don't have a two-story building. I have a deck in my backyard and I can clearly see my neighbor's yard. Unfortunately, when you move to the city, that is one of the things that you do give up a little bit of, unfortunately, but there are many things you gain as well. I was disappointed this evening to hear that it was always the intention, and I went back and checked, and it was given to council in May 2018 as a detached garage, and I believe we asked the questions of, is this going to be anything other than a detached garage at that time, because I believe that it was something that we were thinking of because of the process. But I can't say for sure. I don't know if we have YouTube back then. I unfortunately have difficulty supporting something as a ask for forgiveness scenario. But again, I do have another question for Mr. Brooks, as I've asked this question a number of times in a number of different situations. If this motion is declined this evening, what is the process and how do we hold the people asking accountable?
The garage can be used as a garage with a storage shed above it.
And how do we hold the people asking permission this evening accountable to that?
If you're asking if they go ahead and do it anyhow, there's a process that the Planning Act follows, and there is a process that has to be went through, and it goes to the courts for settlement.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Butts?
Yeah, just to be clear, Mr. Brooks, you indicated that if it continues to be a garage, that they can continue to do that. But did you not say earlier that there would have to still be some modifications to the building to use it as a garage?
The windows would have to be moved off the east side for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I've been a little bit struggling with this. I certainly don't want to belabor the whole issue, but what I look at it is it's more of an issue sometimes of the process than it is of the structure itself. And I do want to commend Mr. and Mrs. McCabe for the upkeep and the condition of the property that they purchased. It does certainly help the neighborhood. That said, I feel that this was a strong way to circumvent the process, to basically get something, to me, that would basically be two houses on a single property, and was a way to go around it. The question I have, first of all, and I'll be brief, is to Mr. Brooks, through the mayor, if that's okay. And I know that the next item we have on here is the variation order, but if the conditional use was approved, but the variation order wasn't, is this a legitimate question to ask? What would happen then?
Legitimate question. I think that's why the resolution says with the condition that the variation also be approved, because if the conditional use was approved without that variation, then the conditional use to have a garden suite, or sorry, a secondary suite is still there.
2 weeks ago, this council, not unanimous, but voted in favor of creating the very first secondary suite bylaw that we had in Portage. And I think we agreed at that time, almost all of us, that it would be a good thing for Portage. So that's where my conundrum is. If we went back, and if I went back to where this, before the structure was built, and there was no structure there, and they were applying for a secondary suite, wouldn't I approve it? And I'd probably have to say I would approve it at that point in time. It would make perfect sense. The second thing I'd have to ask is whether or not the size, whether I'd approve the variance. And I probably would have not approved the variance at that point in time. We have conditions that we came up with the bylaw. I'd ask the question at last council meeting as to say, where did those conditions come from? And the conditions were well thought out through the bylaw. We don't have any rules, like we know anarchy and chaos is just created from that. So with that said, at this point in time, I unfortunately, I would probably not support the motion at that area, but because of what's gone on at this point. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Meyer. Any further questions? Councillor Espy?
Just one last comment from me. You brought up the question if you would support it if it was applied for in the proper manner in the first place. I'd just like to remind council that it wasn't that long ago we had a very similar application, and many members of that council are still here today, where a house in the same neighborhood asked for a secondary building to be built, and it had not been built yet, and it was very easy to deny that request at that time.
Comments noted.
Any further questions or comments on the motion? Okay, so Councillor Meyer, just to be clear, could you read the motion once more prior to the vote?
I would love to read the motion once more. So, the recommendation of the committee, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the conditional use application of Justin and Andrea McCabe to allow for a secondary suite above the existing detached garage in a R1, a residential single-family zone at the property 102 First Street Southwest, which is legally described as Lot 3, Block 1, Plan 1998, Parish of Portage la Prairie, conditional upon approval being received for variation PC 72-19.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? That's defeated. Okay, so we're going to move. We're going to move to conditional use PC 73-19. Just the next item was variation order PC 7219 for Justin Andrea McCabe at 102 First Street Southwest, and that's no longer valid.
Maybe ask Mr. Brooks to speak to that.
Mr. Brooks, would you like to comment on that? Sure you would.
I believe just to clear off the books, the hearing should be open and closed and denied probably just because the fact it's all out there if we don't.
Okay.
Through your worship, we were just having a procedural question. Thank you for your patience. The variation order has been formally applied by Justin and Andrew McCabe. If they choose not to withdraw that variation request, we will have to have a hearing. So if Justin and Andrew wish to withdraw that variation request, we could have that withdrawn. If they wish to proceed, and again, the variation was related to the previous motion, then we would have to go forward with the variation. Okay, could I ask you to speak into the mic, Andrea, and just clarify your wish to withdraw the variation, if that is the case?
We wish to withdraw the variation.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you. We'll open the public hearing for conditional use PC 73-19. This is for Restabet Inc. at 109 Duke Avenue. Is there anyone here that would like to speak in favor of the application?
Hello. Good evening.
Evening.
Miriam Triamujika. Do you need my spelling? I will take your spelling. Okay. First name M-I-R-I-A-M. Last name T-U-R-Y-A-M. W-I-J-U-K-A. I had to practice that for a while. Whoa. That was for my comment, right?
It was for your spelling.
Oh, yeah. It's officially done. You probably saw the updates from our pilot over the summer. It was a wonderful opportunity that we had to have the pilot. Initially, we applied for a conditional use just for the pilot for that 3 months. At that time, we had hoped we'd have a permanent location after the fact. Although, as this whole process has been, and with big dreams and not a lot of experience in developing this whole thing, that was unrealistic, and the church has proposed or offered that we extend our stay. Again, this is not a permanent location, but we would like to have an open-ended conditional use this time. That being said, before I forget, I just want to ask that possibly the council will waive our fee of $230, which we had paid initially for the pilot, and we had paid again for this extension. As you saw from the updates about the summer, it was quite an experience, and we learned a lot. There were a total of 12 people that stayed over the summer. I believe there would have been more because it took some time to get the word out. And then in the end, when we did our public announcement about some of the statistics from over the summer, people thought we were closed at that point, and yet we still had 2 weeks left. So one thing I wanted to note that came as a little bit of a surprise to us is that there was no, there was no pattern to who stayed at the shelter. So we had somebody stay who spoke 5 languages fluently. We had somebody stay who used to be a nurse. We had people stay who needed a place to stay because they were waiting to get into the women's shelter. We had somebody stay, or almost stay, who was 17 years old. And she chose not to stay. I'm not sure where she stayed that night, but the reason she chose not to stay was because of rape. And she did not want to stay in a place with men. So some of the comments we heard over the summer and things that just kind of made you realize the reality of homelessness is that people were very tired. We were open from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., which allowed them to have a good night's sleep. But from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., they walked the streets. Many of them had no money, so to go to Tim Hortons and spend the day there was not welcoming. Not saying that Tim Hortons isn't welcoming, but when you don't have money, it's a business. To go to the library and stay there the whole day, that's not always a great option. Staying anywhere the whole day is not always welcomed. There were shoes worn through from walking the whole day, and some of those days were very hot. So just something to note. We all had a rough weekend this past weekend. I've barely made it here because of the past weekend. I feel very fortunate that I had a home, even though it was cold. I feel very fortunate that I have fairly new windows, even though it was cold. And I have a family, and we had food in the fridge. This past weekend, it was an adventure on Saturday. Early Saturday morning, we lost electricity. It was a bit of an adventure. My kids hardly noticed it. They ran around in shorts, and I told them to dress up more because I was cold. And we had fun. We played with candles and made our food on candles. And day 2, I was getting a little tired of it. Still a little bit of an adventure. By supper time, I was ready for electricity. Day 3, we had electricity, but it was only lights. We still didn't have heating to the house. And day 4, I am done. Mentally, I'm done. I know all of you can relate to this. I have a hard time thinking ahead when I'm cold. And thankfully, most of the town is up and running right now, so there's resources. And I have family in town to help. So we're fine. But I can't think straight when I'm cold and when I'm not sure how to cook my next meal. It's really hard to think. Imagine being homeless. Try to tell them to get a job. I'm not going to be able to think about that. I'm just thinking about how to get a warm sleep. My parents came at one point and they brought a heater, a portable one, and heated up the house, and my ability to think about things I had to get done for this coming week improved by 75% just from heat. So I know all of you are aware that this is a crucial thing that needs to be addressed, homelessness in Portage la Prairie. So I'm not trying to change your minds or whatever, but I just thought I would bring that up because it was something on my mind quite a bit this past weekend.
Okay,
So, yeah.
Well, thank you for reminding. I think that's very timely. I think a lot of us were thinking about that on the weekend. Any questions from council? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else here to speak to the hearing? Anyone else that wants to speak against the hearing? Okay. Any letters of support to be read into the record?
Your Worship, I apologize. I feel I should ask a question if I may still.
You may.
Thank you. Do you mind coming back up to the podium? I apologize. I very much appreciate everything that you have done in the small time that you've been working towards this, but I feel like I would not be doing everything asking all the questions I should ask if I don't ask. Have you had any safety concerns?
There is just one individual, and meth seems to be the pattern, but also I think that's the biggest safety concern, although that person who we have known throughout the community has not posed a real threat, just seemingly threat, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only concern.
And do you have the resources or the ability to deal with safety concerns?
We have good support from the RCMP, and we did not have to call the RCMP over the summer because there were no incidents that actually occurred. Although we were told that if we did, we would be on their priority list, and so we feel comfortable with that. We had, throughout the summer, we always had a paid staff, so they were aware of our procedures and everything, and then we would have either an additional paid staff or a volunteer who said that they would sleep through the night. So that was what we had hoped to do for safety for the staff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay, I need a motion to close the hearing.
So be it resolved, and I so move that the public hearing for conditional use PC 7319, Restabit Inc., 109 Duke Avenue, now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor? And it's carried.
Okay, Council, once again, Planning and Economic Development Committee, file number PC 7319. The issue, of course, as you've heard from Ms. Turid, I won't even try, I'm sorry. I wasn't making any fun of that. Of Miriam, to allow for an emergency shelter as an accessory use. So, of course, there are alternatives to approve the conditional use application as presented, to approve the conditional use with conditions, or to deny the conditional use. Background, as you're aware, I know they were here 3 or 4 months ago, that Restabit Inc. and Prairie Vineyard Christian Fellowship have applied for a conditional use to allow for an emergency shelter as an accessory use. The applicant did receive a conditional use for us, or use for this same use early this year, which was PC 1719. The minute reference number is there for your information, with the order stating that it was to be used for a maximum of 3 months. The applicant and the property owner have come to an agreement to have this use stay here for a longer period. The property is located in a C2 Central Commercial Zone. The application was circulated to the various city departments. There were no concerns. Public notices have been sent to all property owners within 100-meter radius, and there was no objection. So, it is my recommendation, and I so move, that the council of the city, it's the recommendation of the committee and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the conditional use application of Restabit Inc. / Prairie Vineyard Christian Fellowship to allow for an emergency shelter as an accessory use in a C2 central commercial zone at the property 109 Duke Avenue, which is legally described as Lot 1, Plan 41708 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Questions or comments on the motion? Go ahead. Councillor Knox?
Mine's just a comment. Miriam, you know I commend you for what you do and your volunteers and your staff who do what you do. And just listening to you just really struck chord with me that you were talking about the challenges of being homeless in Portage in the summer. I can't imagine what it's going to be like being homeless in Portage in the winter. So I'm very happy to vote in favor of this.
Councillor Meyer?
I just wanted to recognize the fact that she, Miss Miriam, had requested something else from council that's not being recognized within this motion, and that was the waiving of a fee.
That may be something for planning district, I'm not sure. So.
Correct. So the motion
Just
does
what
not
you read.
does not reflect that. I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We'll open the public hearing for variation order PC 74-19. This is for Vertex Construction Limited at 342 and 352 Oxford Common. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Variation order PC 74-19. Okay. Entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Be it resolved, and I so move that the public hearing for variation order PC 7419 for Vertex Construction Limited, 342 and 352 Oxford Common now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Knox. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Well, Council, I must admit the Planning and Economic Development Committee has been very busy tonight, but we have one more in front of us. PC 74-19, the issue, of course, is to vary the following. North and south side requirement of 3 meters to be reduced to 1.695 meters. And number 2, the maximum site area requirement of 40% to be increased to 42%. As always, our alternatives are to approve the application or to deny the application. Just some of the background, of course, Vertex Construction is applying for a variation order to vary the following, which I've already spoke to allow for the size of the duplex to be fit on the lot. Mean Estates Limited had previously received approval for the front, rear, and side yards to be reduced and site area to be increased on application PC 1113, and your minutes are there for the reference, and extension PC 1614, and the minute references are there as well. The listed variances were to reduce both side yard requirements down to 1.842 meters and the site area to be increased to 41%. The property to the south has also received a variance to allow the north side to be reduced to 1.695 meters. Minute references there, and this building is in a R2 residential 2-family zone. The application has been circulated to various city departments and there's been no concerns. Public notices have been sent to all property owners with a 100-meter radius, and there has been no objection. So it's the recommendation of this committee, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Vertex Construction Limited, Meehan Estates Limited, to vary the following. North and south side yard requirement of 3 meters to be reduced to 1.695 meters. And number 2, maximum site area requirement of 40% to be increased to 42% at the property known as 342 and 352 Oxford Common, which is legally described as lots 13 and 14, Plan 58988 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. And I think that concludes our hearings for this evening. We're going to move into committee. First up is Finance, Legislative and Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you. Nothing to report on my regular committee report, but I do have an item in new business.
Thank you. City Planning and Economic Development Committee, Councillor Meyer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do always smile once I start looking at the building reports. Of course, this was on committee at last council meeting, so it's there just for your information only. 163 million, if I might say. A record.
That's a record.
Unprecedented. Thank you, Your Worship.
That's what a record would be, unprecedented. Community Services Committee, Councillor Draycott, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last committee meeting, we had a presentation from the Communities in Bloom Committee, and so that is there for review if you don't remember the notes and the presentation that we went through last committee meeting.
And Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall, please.
Waterworks Committee has nothing to report this evening, Your Worship.
Transportation Committee, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Transportation Committee has nothing to report.
Public Safety Committee, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. We have no deferred business, but as Councillor Buzz mentioned, we do have one item of new business this evening. Councillor Buzz.
Thank you. So, as we all know, we went through quite a weekend here in Portage, and the mayor did declare a state of a local emergency on October the 13th due to that severe windstorm that involved high winds, large amounts of snow and ice. And so I think you folks all know that the city has already expended a significant amount of resources managing this situation, be it if it is overtime wages, is additional rentals, infrastructure, you name it, materials, etc. And so what we want to really do is to speak to the province about what this has meant to our municipality and the expenditures that we have had to incur. As we know, the provincial government did also state declare a state of emergency for hydro specifically. And so we do want to get ahead of this and start to accumulate, or sorry, not to accumulate, but to start to assess some of the impact from us from a financial perspective and get in the queue with the province as it relates to that. So when a natural disaster occurs that exceeds the ability of our local authority to respond or recover, the disaster financial assistance may be requested, and that is exactly what we need to do. And to do that, we have to have a council resolution. So it is a recommendation of administration, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie authorizes administration to complete a community impact assessment and apply for disaster financial assistance with respect to the state of local emergency declared on October 13th, 2019.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. So we are adjourning council at 7:58 p.m. and we're going to move right into committee, and committee is open to the public. It's in committee. Committee is open to the public. It's open to the media. We'll call committee to order at 7:58 p.m. First up is Finance, Legislative Property Committee. Councillor Buds, have you got anything tonight?
I do not have anything to report tonight.
Thank you. City Planning and Economic Development, Councillor Meyer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The City Planning and Economic Development Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. Community Services Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Worship. Community Services Committee has nothing to report this evening.
Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Waterworks Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. And Transportation, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Transportation Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. Public Safety, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Public Safety has nothing to report this evening.
Okay, thank you. Well, before we adjourn, I just want to mention, and Councillor Buds had mentioned it, and other people have mentioned earlier, that it was quite a weekend, the last 4 to 5 days. And I want to just thank and recognize a few groups of people here. First of all, I want to thank our team that worked tirelessly throughout the weekend, led by Chief Carpenter down there, and Nathan as his alternate, and a lot of the people that we see sitting around the table were working throughout the weekend in our our EOC offices, and also a lot of crews who are out working round the clock that aren't here tonight necessarily. They're probably trying to get some sleep today. It was much appreciated. Really, really impressed. And people that came here from other communities, the head of EMO, when he came in, just commented on the work that was being done and the quality of work. So all the preparation that the staff put into this is really paying off for the entire community. And also want to thank Manitoba Hydro. I'm sure there will be some critics out there. However, they have done a huge job in mobilizing enormous numbers of workers, and there's 500 more coming to our community tonight and tomorrow. And we'll be working in Portage and out from here. So huge effort is being put on to deal with this crisis in a timely fashion. And finally, we want to thank the citizens of Portage la Prairie for being stoic, for being patient, and for really handling this crisis well. It really, after day 3, day 4, it really tests a person's patience. So want to recognize those folks too. And that being said, committee is adjourned at 8:01 p.m. Thank you for coming, everybody.